There is an idea which is rapidly growing in the West, like cancerous resurge. And like the previous surges, it needs to be fought and it needs to be killed before Europe becomes again a land of death and bestiality. The idea I'm talking about is militant atheism. And here's the difference between fanatical, political, militant, dogmatic atheism and atheism as just a personal conviction. The latter, for the most fortunate of us, is just a passing phase in our own personal, spiritual and intellectual developments as we search for truth. Or it can be a lifelong personal conviction for others. Militant atheism, on the other hand, is atheism on the streets, in the classrooms, in the workplace, in your face, and much, much worse, in the corridors of power. It is the doctrine and the associated program that advocates that religious beliefs should be, at best, exercised in the home behind closed doors, but ideally not even there. It's the belief that man will only be complete when he accepts he is a flesh and bone machine, and like a machine he should allow himself to be ruled and guided by those who know better what's best for him to function properly and happily. To achieve that end, amongst many other things, these people want to make the teaching of religion and theology to children illegal. They wish not only to stop any kind of funding to religious institutions, but also tax those institutions as if they were commercial organizations. And they never waste a bad opportunity to use their influence to publicly attack anything related to religious worship and belief. Of course, it's not religious worship per se that they wish to demolish, but religious morality and virtue, and very particularly old Christian morality and virtue, as they stand in the way of their plan of degrading and of bestialising mankind. These people wish to fill the hearts of mankind with a sense of false sophistication and false freedom, and they wish to convince us all that right and wrong are invented by culture and are different everywhere, therefore should be flexible concepts. They urge us to reject tradition and to reject truth, so that eventually we will even distrust our own consciences and distrust the inner truth that speaks to all of us who are willing to listen. And finally, when that is achieved, they will easily fill the void left with their murderous immorality and thus create a new man. In other words, they wish to accomplish, without firing a single bullet, what Pol Pot and Stalin and their friends could not achieve with their death camps. The more you allow them to fill your hearts with pride and interfere with your consciences, the heavier price you and your offspring will pay in the end. I can promise you that. And it's particularly easy to expose people like Dawkins and other well-publicized atheists, now that so many of them have finally dropped the fallacious misnomer of humanist to define themselves and feel security enough and protected enough to call themselves atheists. The veil has been dropped and you can see them in their ugly pitilessness. As the term humanism can be made, be made to mean anything you want, like the terms good and freedom, they decided to use it for a while. Now they have decided it's no longer necessary. And who were the historical forefathers of these people? What were the purposes of their activism and what were the results of it? Well, there is one terrible obstacle that Europeans, Westerners and Christians generally must overcome in the fight against this problem and against other similar problems, and that is amnesia. Most of us don't know what happened in the world 5 or 10 years ago, so how can we be expected to have any idea of what happened in 17th century Paris or 20th century Russia? and to comprehend what relation that has to our lives and to our futures. In this age where the study of history is generally accepted to be best left for experts or professionals, and not something which captivates both teenagers and adults, and the little historical knowledge people seem to still accept is through Hollywood's oversimplistic, when not completely falsified, historical dramas. It is very difficult to convince people to step back a few hundred years to discuss ideas many believe just developed in the last few decades. Well, the only way of overcoming this obstacle is quite simply to study history and not rely on others to briefly summarize historical facts as they present their arguments. And at the very least, you can ask people to double check the facts as they are presented to them and challenge whoever has addressed them if their research and their love for truth compels them to do so. But here we go. The first time atheism raised its head above ground was in 17th century France. It is difficult to find clear evidence of it in any other society or culture before then, where atheism was endorsed unapologetically, even though some militant atheists tried to very dubiously stick atheism to pre-Socratic Greek philosophers to claim some archaic roots for themselves, I suppose. Either way, we Europeans carry the shame of having the originators of this idea amongst our ancestors. But back to 17th century Paris. After much intriguing and conspiring by coffee shop and brothel revolutionaries, who were a very strange mix of sexual perverts, bored aristocrats, and resentful bourgeois, all with varied degrees of grievances against the established order, and looking for some action on others. The disenfranchised proletariat was manipulated and agitated enough to strike at the heart of the decadent royalty, and order collapsed. The revolutionary tribunals ensued. Christianity and belief in God was declared an ancient superstition, while God was abolished by decree, and a wave of anti-human activity naturally ensued. Mass murder, mass torture, pillaging and fire. The second time, the ideological and moral grandparents of Dawkins, Hitchens, and their friends made an impact in the world. It was, of course, much more tragic. I'm talking about Marxism manifest. The Russian Bolsheviks and their comrades throughout Europe and Asia would take their murderous atheism to an entirely new level in the history of mankind. This time the killing of Christians and other religious believers was to be done by the crowds of possessed cowards like in France 3 centuries earlier, but much more importantly in an entirely new way through a system of re-education, labor, killing camps where many millions of Gentiles died ghastly death. Interesting, I say again, that many atheists in the public sphere find themselves protected enough to present themselves using exactly the same term as the communist mass murderers used. The term militant atheist was used by Lenin's and ensuing governments. And do they do it now because they know most people don't know enough history to save their lives, quite literally, or do they do it because they cannot help themselves in their exhilaration? I think it's a mix of both. One, the unwashed masses are definitely not going to revolt and riot against the dissemination of these ideas in their children's classrooms, in the libraries and mass media, as they don't know or don't comprehend history, so they don't have any idea where this kind of ideology leads to. And second, Dawkins and many of his pals seem to be unwilling to let their program progress slowly and gradually, like in a Fabian fashion, if you like. And I've noticed a sudden crescendo in their chuspa, possibly because they're getting old and perhaps wish to transfer all all they really have inside into the minds of their followers, while they still have time in this world. There is no way of doing that without going for broke, and you cannot go for broke without forsaking care and forsaking decorum. Now, another point is how are they getting their message across? And if you do some research on the conduits of communication these people continuously make use of, you will realize that we're not talking about the grassroots movement by any shape or form. Dawkins, Hitchens, etc. did not emerge by public demand from under, but they were already on top from the very start. These people and their ideas are being maintained in the public eye by very powerful forces, primarily but not exclusively in the worlds of televised media and publishing. And they are endorsed and helped to propagate their ideas by very powerful forces from the beginning of their militant atheist careers or side careers. And that begs the question, why are these millionaires and these financiers supporting atheist activism? What are their real intentions? Obviously, it's not to upset or destroy the ruling classes, like in the French, Russian, or Cambodian antecedents, as these people are the ruling classes. The question is complicated, and I'll leave you to meditate on it, but I believe that they want to create a new man to serve them in their new world order, a man who cannot understand anything that is transcendent, like God, family, nation, or even good or evil. They wish to manufacture a docile machine. They wish to rule over a new man who will not react to revolution with counter-revolution, as it has been the case throughout our history, but a man who will stay grateful, compliant brute, easily governed by them forever. Make no mistake, the self-appointed masters of the New World Order can destroy your nations and your surroundings through mass immigration, manipulation of finance, and creation of wars. They can do worse damage to you internally if you allow their atheistic propaganda to deceive you. They can destroy you from the inside out. And the choice is yours, and the hour is late. Your future and your soul will be yours, or they will be theirs. Thanks for listening.